I mean, all you have to do is go into a school at 5th, 6th, 7th graders and take a look at them, and they are all shapes and sizes, all levels of physical and emotional maturity. And I think one of the things that's a bit unfortunate is that our systems are less forgiving about that children mature at very different rates. So we need to keep that in mind. So for the development, the context of development, adjustment to changes in puberty, and I've mentioned earlier that puberty starts a lot earlier, and actually by the time you see the signs of the secondary sexual characteristics, the development of breasts and pubic hair and all of the changes that come, there have been hormonal changes that have preceded that by at least a year. So we're talking about, it's not unusual to see 10-year-olds who've begun to have some changes, or the mother or the father have noticed they're acting differently, they seem upset more, they seem moody more. This is a difficult time for them because they're adjusting to these body changes. It feels overwhelming, it can feel confusing, it can feel like they're out of control. There's an upsurge in sexual impulses, an upsurge in aggressive impulses. There's also a greater desire to masturbate, and that is frightening to many children, and it's a time that parents need to be talking to their children about that again. So there's an intense self-consciousness that develops in early adolescence. There's also time that they compare themselves to others. They're very egocentric, and part of that egocentricity has to do with sort of turning in to shore up with all that they feel vulnerable about. There's a narcissistic vulnerability, as if there's an imaginary audience. I mean, think about it now. We all do this if we go to a new place, that we have a sense of walking around and noticing things and feeling like maybe we're being noticed. But with adolescents, they can feel like there's an audience everywhere they go, and whatever they say or whatever they do is the wrong thing, an embarrassing thing. So that's part of what's going on with them too. There's, and in early adolescence, there's the, in terms of the development of the sense of self, they go back and forth between omnipotent fantasies so that they can feel bigger and stronger than they really are feeling, because at the same time now they're really starting to bump up against reality. They may love to play hockey or skate or play baseball, but all of a sudden they're running up against the reality that maybe they're not going to make the big leagues. And that had been their fantasy all along, and that's a blow to their self-esteem. So that they then, deal with that painful blow by having a fantasy that they will make the big leagues after all, and then they have to come to terms with it once again. So that there's that fluctuation between the, reality and fantasy that goes on with adolescence. Separation individuation, this comes from the old term by Peter Blos, who wrote decades ago about that. And I think we have a greater understanding about separation individuation. What it means is that the teen is trying to lessen that there's shifts in the tie to the parents. They're trying to grow up and become their own person so that it's not a total identification with the parent, but that they have their own ideas and their own feelings. That makes them more vulnerable, because it means that as they get to know, they begin to look at who their parents are and aren't. Maybe they aren't the people they had thought they were. They lose the idealization, and adolescents can experience that as a loss. Affiliation and relational maturity. One of the things that feminists bring to this understanding is that it's not just about separating, being independent. That's kind of the American way. It's also, and most successfully done growing up, when you have rich, mature relationships. So it's not just separating, it's also developing affiliations, it's connecting to others, it's making friends. And those two things hopefully can happen simultaneously. Now, early on, the younger adolescents may choose friends that mirror what they want to be, or choose an adolescent who's going to kind of complete them. You know, if they're small and they want to be tall, they may choose a tall friend. I mean, that's sort of a superficial part of it. Or if they have trouble with reading, they may choose someone who's very good academically, or so on. Or if they are shy, they may want to hang out with friends who are more socially comfortable in groups. And then as they begin to get more comfortable with who they are and get a sense of who they are, then the types of relationships that mature. Okay. Identity. I mentioned earlier that this is that adolescents who are unsure about their sexual orientation or their gender identity, adolescents who are gay, lesbian, transgendered. This is a very critical growth time for them where they need enormous support. Because this is a critical part of identity development during adolescence. And it may require more time. If there are questions, if there are confusions, especially if they haven't been supported by their family. This is also a period of abstract and critical thinking skills. You know, when they enter early adolescence, there's still a lot of leftover magical thinking going on, still some concrete thinking going on. Now they begin to get the idea that there can be two meanings to things, so that you can see adolescents start to have fun with puns. You can really see them start to have fun with sarcasm, with jokes, all of those things. So this is a time period where they grow from being very concrete thinkers into later adolescence, where they have the capacity to reflect, to appreciate a metaphor. And finally, affect regulation. This will be a critical piece in working with adolescents, because one of the difficulties, one of the things that needs to get addressed is not just the negative thinking, but it's the adolescent's capacity to learn to self-soothe. And if they haven't had that in their early childhood, they enter this developmental stage that, as we've been talking about, requires so much. And lots of feelings. They get stirred up quite a bit. And if they don't have some sort of strategies for soothing themselves, for learning to deal with all of these feelings, they're at greater risk. So how do they experience their emotions? How do they deal with their emotions? How do they deal with the upsurge in sexual feelings and aggressive feelings without feeling like they're bad? So the dangers of this stage revolve around failures to work through these identity challenges. Sometimes the role diffusion is so confusing and so overwhelming in terms of the choices that have to be made that they find the uncertainty and the confusion intolerable. And that's where patience and acceptance is really especially needed, and guidance. The danger is there'll be identity foreclosure. And what does that mean? That means they'll make a decision real quickly because they can't tolerate the questions that they have about who they really are and what they really want in life. So they'll settle on a narrowly defined role without exploring options. And safe exploration of options are very important for adolescents in discovering who they are as individuals. Or there's the negative identity formation, and that is for adolescents who have struggled, especially with affect intolerance. They may choose antisocial identity based on a lack of opportunity or a low self-esteem or negative self-images for for an adolescent, let's say an adolescent boy who has had very few opportunities and who has, for various reasons, been humiliated as a child, they may choose to defend against that ongoing vulnerability by being tough and creating a very inflexible exterior that really is a defense against feeling like they're a nobody because they were humiliated and mistreated earlier in their life. I imagine there are quite a few young people, teens, in the juvenile justice system who chose to protect themselves from this profound vulnerability by choosing to be tough and by affiliating with gangs to have a group to protect them. Okay. Oh, sorry. Adolescents are intermittently and transitionally interested in the topic of death. And they may want to talk about death a lot because, you know, that's the ultimate separation. And this is a period of separation and individuation. But actively planning and incessantly thinking about suicide and death is, like I said, a derailment from the adolescent growth process. What are the protective factors? Access to clinical care for mental, physical, and substance abuse disorders, family and community support, secure attachment and secure base. Do most of you know what I'm talking about when I talk about a secure attachment and a secure base? Could you nod or, okay. That's been an area that we've, VCE and our various trainings we've been trying to talk about, and that's attachment theory, and that it has to do with the early child and caregiver relationship, the formation of an insecure or secure attachment. And the child then begins to internalize the positives of secure attachment. And it's that internalization that they then use as they grow to self-soothe, to feel good about themselves, and so on, to make the right choices in their life and so on. An insecure attachment means that they could be anxious, avoidant, wary of relationships, not trust that they can do things and hold back, become inhibited and hold back. And when we talk about secure base, the secure base has to do with that secure relationship. So if you've got this secure base, you feel free enough to go out and explore because you can look back and know that that secure base is there. So if an adolescent enters the developmental stage with a secure base, with a sense that home is always there, you know, and when I say home, I mean someone who loves this child, and the child knows that, they can then go out and explore and feel safe to do that. However, if a child is in adolescence and there's a lot of chaos at home, perhaps there is the breakup of the marriage, it feels as if they really can't be safe to explore because the home base is out of control. So instead of having a base that they can sort of dance around and explore and reach out and to the rest of the world, they either have to stay too close to home base or they feel really unmoored. They feel adrift and lost. Family and community connections are very important. A resilient youth is a youth that knows how to ask for help. So if it doesn't come from their home environment, if they can find it from other family members and their extended family, from their coach, from their teacher, from someone in the community, that can give them the connection that they need to get through. Other protective factors, coping skills, and we talked earlier about affect dysregulation and affect regulation. Well,